So at the moment we've got something that I actually hope works. It's not going to do anything. We need to start filling in some of the detail here. But I'm hoping it works. The thing that I need to do is to actually save this program. Well, save as. I'm going to call it game.py and I'm going to run it. So this is my first run. If I've got any errors, they will show up nicely. If I've got no errors, that will happen. Nothing. So I'm quite pleased with the way this is going at the moment. Now, what we've got to think about is what we're going to pass in and out, the parameters to the functions and the arguments. So when we create the grid, what we need to know is what size it's going to be. So I've put size as a parameter there. When we do it down here, it's called an argument. So I've got create grid size, and when it's created the grid, what I want it to do is return the grid. And actually I'm going to run this program now because I know I'm going to get an error and why. So I'm going to save that. Oops. File save, and I'm going to run the program. And I'm going to get errors. And there's my first one. It says size is not defined. So what that means is down here I've chosen to use size, but I haven't said how big size would be. So I need my variable size equals 10 because I want a 10 by 10 grid. That should solve that error. So let's run that again. I need to be the right one. But I'm still getting an error. And it's really the same error, saying that grid is not defined. Now, if you remember, I'm returning my grid, which is going to be an array, but I haven't said that there's an array. So if I just say I've got an empty array at the moment, that will do the job for me. That will stop the error messages at least. So save that and run it. And I've got no errors. So I've got to do the same thing now with place chests. And if we think about it here, we want to be able to say, well, I want 3 treasure chests on my board. So let's go back. So if I'm going to place the chests, I need to know how many place chests. None. And without me trying it out, you should realize that at the moment num is not defined, so I need to define num for it to work. So if I save and run that, there we go, nothing amiss. Now, I've got bandits now, so maybe I ought to call that num chests. Now, the name down here, the argument can be different to the name here. It does not have to be the same. So when I save this and run it, I'm expecting it to work with no error message. There we go. Now that's nice because I can now type in here num bandits, and in here just type num. And the reason I'm doing this is I can roughly use the same code each time, because if I'm going to place the chests on here, I'm going to use the same kind of code to actually place the bandits on here. So I'm just going to use num. And position the player. I'm going to leave the player out and the grid out at the moment and just concentrate on these. Now I'm going to get an error when I run this because although I've used num bandits here, I haven't declared it at all. So let's see that happen. I'm not going to do this all the time, otherwise it would be very painful. There we go. Num bandits is not defined. So all I need to do is type num bandits here equals 3, and that cures that problem. Now this is nice because if we think about it, we can ask the user how big they want the board to be. We can ask the user how many chests they want on the board, and we can ask the user how many bandits they want on the board. So we've already got a game now that we can sort of customize as we go along. It can be bigger, it can be smaller, and so forth. We only got to change these numbers, and we can actually ask the user for those, which we may do shortly. And we're beginning to send in information. Now the problem is I've got here return grid. Now that's quite important because the grid is created in here, but I need to use it everywhere else. So if I need to place the chests on the grid, I need to know how many, but I also need to know what the grid is. And once I've placed the chests on the grid, I need to return the grid. Now this time I am not initializing the grid because I've passed it in as a variable, so it won't give me an error from that. I'm going to do the same with the bandits. I'm going to put the bandits on the grid, so I need the grid, and I need to know how many there are, and once they're put on the grid, I need to return the grid back to the main program. So hopefully that will have done the trick, but I'm going to get, and I'll go through the error. I won't later, but I'll go through the error now. I'm going to get an error. Hopefully you'll figure out what that error is before I tell you. And if you don't, that's fine. So let's run the program. And there's my error. It says place chest takes 2 arguments, but only 1 given. So it's saying place chest takes 2 arguments there, but only 1 given, num chests. So we need to handle this. If I'm returning variables, then I need to catch those. So if I type grid equals, that means when the grid is created and returned, it's held in here, grid. And I can use that grid to pass it into the next function. So now I've got 2 arguments as required. But remember, I'm returning the grid, so I need to also catch that when I'm back in my program. And obviously the same is going to go for bandits. I need to pass in the grid and catch it when it comes back. And what I'm saying about catch it when it comes back is it's been altered inside here. So on this one, it's put some bandits on this one, it's put some chests on, and in this one, it creates it to begin with. And so this needs to be passed back with the alterations. And you probably can see already, if I put the player on, the player needs to be put onto the grid, and we need to capture that when it comes back. And if we're going to show the grid, well, we need a grid. We need to pass the grid in to show the grid, but nothing is going to change. I'm only going to display it. I'm not going to put a player on. I'm not going to put a bandit on. I'm not going to put a chest on. I'm just going to display it. So nothing gets returned from here. I haven't made any changes, just displaying it on the screen. So I don't need to capture it. If I am capturing things like this, they are called functions. So functions always have an equal sign in them. This one is called a procedure. It doesn't have an equal sign and nothing is returned. So if it returns something, it's a function. So that's a function. I need to change that to return grid. That's a procedure. It returns nothing. I'm not going to change the grid and send it back. These change the grid and return it. These are functions. this is a procedure. Now, hopefully, all the edits that I've made will be good and not cause it to crash in any way. So finally for this video, I'm going to run it and see what I get. And I get absolutely nothing. Let me just close that again and run it in a fresh window. I get nothing. So that's indicating that my program is fine. Now I'm decomposing it. I am breaking it up into small pieces, okay, and managing it one piece at a time. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually probably create the grid, and then I'm going to show the grid. I'll put these chests and players on a little bit later, but we'll look in the next video on sort of creating the grid, getting it going.